And these are the untold stories of the queen of soul music, Aretha Franklin, who, from the moment she became popular, started digging her own grave. Franklin was forced to a slow and painful death because of the life she chose, and after her demise, her children are still dragging her name even to this day. But why does she blame her father for her misfortunes in life? Let's find out while showing you some of her rare photos. Aretha has a lot of interesting details in her story, but what might probably be the most fascinating is that she got pregnant at the age of 12. Now that defies the usual laws of nature, but it happens, and everyone blames Aretha's father. Franklin was born into a religious home. Her father was a Baptist preacher and her mother made a living playing the piano. Aretha does not look back at her childhood with a smile on her face. First, she had to deal with children from her parents' past relationships, and losing her mother before her 7th birthday shattered her. She died of a heart attack, and that was the beginning of Aretha's trouble. Before she died, Aretha's mother fought for a divorce because of her husband's infidelity, and they would finally separate in 1948. After their divorce, Aretha recalled seeing her mother just once before her death. Being managed by a promiscuous father introduced her to the way of the streets. So, Franklin grew up believing that women were objects of sexual satisfaction. So when her singing talent was discovered, the first attack on her was going to be successful. Aretha, at age 12, got pregnant from her school friend Donald Burke, and she gave birth to her first daughter just 2 months before she turned 13. Franklin named her Clarence, and it was going to be the first of 2 babies she would have before the age of 15. Her second child, Edward, came 2 years later, and the identity of his father remains unknown. So Aretha delegated her motherhood duties to her grandmother so she could promote her voice, but at the end of her life, she wished she had gone for something else. To this day, her children almost hate each other because of their mother's mistake. While he might have been the reason her life was torn apart, Aretha's father takes credit for raising her to be the music star we all loved and celebrated. Right from her early days, he would always encourage her to sing in front of the congregation. He would help her up a chair when she was small so she could sing in the church, and this inspired Aretha's love for music. She mastered the piano by ear at age 10, and during this time, she tried attending public school in Detroit, but she only made it to her 2nd year. Now it was music or nothing, and her father would make sure that she gave all she could. After her mother's death, Aretha's father managed her career. Because of his influence in the gospel industry, he attracted celebrities like Clara Ward, Martin Luther King Jr., Jackie Wilson, and Sam Cooke. So it was easy for Aretha to break through with a voice like that. When she was 12, her father would take her on road trips where she would perform in various churches, and he also helped her in signing her first recording deal with JVB Records. In 1956, JVB released Aretha's debut single, Never Grow Old. This was backed up with 3 other songs, You Get Closer and Precious Lord Part 1 and 2. Around this time, Franklin went on tours with the American gospel band The Soul Stirrers, and at age 15 she traveled with Martin Luther King Jr. Interestingly, she would also sing at his funeral in 1968. Her meeting with American singer Sam Cooke compelled her to move forward. So at age 18, Franklin convinced her father to let her travel to New York with Cooke so she could become a pop musician. New York was the place it all happened for her, as within a few weeks, she was in the studio of one of the biggest record labels in America, all thanks to her father's influence. Columbia Records agreed to sign her as a 5% artist, and when they released her first record, Today I Sing the Blues, in a few weeks it reached the top 10 of the Hot Rhythm and Blues chart. Her first album was going to be an even greater hit. Released in 1961, Aretha's album, Aretha with the Ray Bryant, was going to feature a song that would make it to the Billboard Top 100. This was great progress, but Aretha found significant success when she joined Atlantic Records. There she released most of her famous albums like Lady Soul, Spirit of the Dark, Young, Gifted, and Black, and Amazing Grace. Some of the singer's most popular hits include Respect, A Natural Woman, I Say a Little Prayer, and Freeway of Love. With a career spanning over 6 decades, Franklin scored 18 Grammy Awards, and she was also the first female to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1987. She recorded global sales of over 75 million records, and this established her as one of the world's most selling music artists. Aretha might have a stellar music record, but she had just one weakness, one she didn't conquer until she died. It always puzzled her fans how one of the most notable music artists, with 18 Grammy Awards and over $75 million in records sold across the globe, would travel in a coach bus. Long distances meant long hours cramped in a bus seat, but Aretha didn't seem to mind. Franklin made a shocking revelation of why she didn't fly in any aircraft in the last 31 years leading to her death. Turns out that she is terrified of planes. But it was not always like this until 1984. According to her, she was in a tiny twin-engine plane en route to Detroit when they hit turbulence. Luckily, the pilot managed to land the plane, but on that spot, Franklin decided she would never get on one again. The demands of her career forced her to change her mind shortly after this, and when she did, it would happen again, but this time she meant it. She was done. Her bandmates encouraged her to take the course Fearless Flyers, but after missing out on the first 2 weeks, she decided not to go back. However, before her death, she was planning her first flight in 33 years. "It's a short trip back to Chicago and back," she said. "I can walk home if I'm not comfortable." But unfortunately, that never happened. She had gotten addicted to ground transportation, and without therapy, her phobia of flying got even worse. Although the limitations of road transportation made her lose a lot of opportunities, she simply didn't care. To her, it was a small price to pay for her peace of mind. Another problem she had all her life was with relationships and marriages. She learned by watching her parents, so Aretha somehow never believed that marriage was meant to last. Her first marriage was in 1961 to American songwriter Ted White. Aretha's father had supported her all her life. He didn't throw her out when she got pregnant twice out of wedlock, and he blessed her move to New York in search of greener pastures. But when he heard of her relationship with White, he dismissed it without even an opportunity to get to know him. Time would prove that he made the right decision after all. After their marriage, it all became clearer to Aretha. Ted was not the man she had thought him to be. He frequently abused her physically, and union with him almost forced her into depression. Aretha was constantly booked on the streets of Detroit for drunk driving, and she lived in isolation. They were married for 7 years, and in 1968 they separated. The couple shared a son, Teddy White Jr., who was born in 1964. Like his mother, he would pursue the path of the chords, and he performed as a back guitarist for Aretha during her live concerts. Her second marriage was to actor Glynn Turman. They met at the backstage of a popular show in the late 70s, and they got married in 1978. Their love was a passionate one, but the demands of their career were going to come between them. Aretha became a stepmother to Turman's 3 children, and while she had hoped that it would last forever, at some point they would agree that it was better if they separated. So they did. In 1982, Glynn and Aretha went separate ways but maintained a friendship until she died in 2017. And that was Franklin's last shot at happily ever after. The closest she ever got after this was in 2012 when she announced plans to marry Willie Wilkerson, but that never happened. Dark days were coming, and they didn't care if Aretha was prepared or not. In 1979, while Franklin was performing at the Aladdin Hotels in Las Vegas, her father was shot twice at point-blank range in his home in Detroit. After years of intensive care, he gave up the ghost on July 27, 1984. In 1988, she lost her sister Carolyn to breast cancer, and the following year, her brother, who served as her manager, was going to die from lung cancer. She was almost alone in a world she was lured into. "Trying to grow up is hurting, you know," she said. "You make mistakes, you try to learn from them, and when you don't, it hurts even more. And I've been hurt badly." Broken marriages forced Aretha into depression, and at the peak of it all, she was going to find a dangerous habit to help her get through it. Although she never spoke publicly about it, alcoholism became her strong addiction. She tried to keep it away from the public, but her siblings reported that alcohol was the reason why she missed so many shows in the late 70s and 80s. One time, her drinking made her fall off a stage and she would break her arm. It constantly also had her in police custody for breaking traffic laws. But when she found her way back to the local church in the late 70s, Aretha was able to quit drinking and has stayed clean ever since. She had a similar problem with cigarettes. It was even rumored that at some point, the least she was doing was 3 packs a day. Luckily, she was able to break free, but this time it might have been too late. Franklin lived a wild life. She enjoyed doing things that were dangerous to her health, from living more than half of her life as an overweight to heavy intakes of alcohol and cigarettes. The cause of her death was pancreatic cancer, and it is believed that she could have taken care of it if only she was more careful. In 2010, Franklin canceled her concerts and went in for emergency surgery, and after the surgery, she lost 85 pounds. Rumors went wild, and everyone believed that it was pancreatic cancer, but she denied it each time. "I don't have to talk about my health with anybody other than my doctors," she would always say. But 7 years later, word about her health made headlines. In 2018, Aretha was reported to be ill, and she was placed on hospice care in her home in Riverfront Towers, Detroit. She died on August 16, 2018, after 7 years of suffering from pancreatic cancer. You would think that after her death, Aretha would find the peace she most sought after while she was alive. But no, her children were going to keep her name hot on everyone's lips. After years of prolonged sickness, Aretha never wrote an official will. After her death, it was agreed that her wealth would be shared equally amongst her 4 sons until a shocking discovery. A handwritten will dated June 2010 was found in a locked cabinet in her home, and a few months later, another note, dated March 2014, was found under her sofa. 2 of her sons believed the last one to be the original copy of the will, while the other son argued that the first one was the real one. Each of the notes was scribbled, and this made it very difficult to make out what she wrote, but despite their differences, both documents would see Aretha's sons share revenues from her music and copyrights. At the time of her death, Franklin's fortune was estimated to be somewhere around $80 million, but after her long list of unpaid taxes was cleared, it was valued at just under $6 million. Her children still have not reached a common ground even after months of going back and forth. Given my aunt's love for her family and desire for privacy, this is not what she would have wanted for us, Franklin's niece, Miss Owen, lamented. The Queen of the Soul left an indelible mark in the music industry, and with her powerful voice, she is established today as an icon of soul, gospel, and R&B. Beyond her works in the studio, her activism reflected her true personality and humanity. At her funeral, former U.S. President Barack Obama celebrated her, saying that she helped define the American experience. Aretha might be dead, but the melodies she created in our hearts would last for generations to come. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to check out our other videos of beautiful actresses from the past on the end screen.